Can you unshare now, Sophie?
Okay, well, hello everybody. My name's Melissa Leach. I'm director here at IDS, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a small in-person audience and a very large online audience to this year's IDS Annual Lecture. And I think online we have more than 220 people, so fantastic to have you all with us today. So the IDS Annual Lecture is our flagship event in the Institute's calendar, when we welcome who we see as the most exciting thinkers in the international development space. And we're absolutely honoured, and I'm really excited this year to have as our guest speaker the renowned international artist and intellectual, Samson Kambalu. Samson is based in Oxford, but he was born in Malawi. He's an artist, he's a writer, he's also Associate Professor of Fine Art at the Ruskin School of Art, and a Fine Art Fellow in Magdalen College in Oxford. And what's super exciting is that his sculpture, Antelope, has recently been chosen by public vote in the UK for display on the 4th Plinth in Trafalgar Square, and that'll be up next year for us all to go and visit. What that work does, as I think Samson will be explaining more to us, is to restage a 1914 photograph of Baptist preacher and Pan-Africanist John Chilembwe and a European missionary, John Chorley, as a sculpture. And I think, as we'll see, it shows Chilembwe towering over his white counterpart and wearing a hat in defiance of colonial rules that forbade Africans at that time from wearing hats in front of white people, if you can imagine. So this evening, I'm picking up on that theme. I believe Samson's going to speak to us on the antelope and the problematic of the gift. And in doing that, I think he's going to be exploring some of the most pressing issues that we encounter in international development and development studies, thinking about colonial legacies, about power imbalances, about continuing to challenge hierarchies, alongside sharing some of his own experiences of growing up in Malawi and then moving to become an international artist and a professor at Oxford University. I'm particularly excited about the theme this year because it also speaks to two of the most pressing concerns and areas of really live debate in our IDS community around our strategy. One around decolonizing development, whatever that might mean, and the other around how arts can be used as a medium for thinking, for communication, for ideas and action. And I hope very much that Samson is going to enrich and enlighten us on both those themes. So looking forward to it enormously. Just a couple of practical notes before we start. We very much hope to have probably up to about half an hour for Q&A, both from our online audience and from those of us in the room. If you're watching online, please put any questions in the Q&A on the screen, and when we get to that point, they will be read out for you. If you're in the room, we'd ask you to raise your hand and I will pick that up, and then I'd ask you to come to the front and just speak your question or comment into the microphone. That's so that our online audience can also hear. On Zoom, we also have the closed captions facility available. So if you would benefit from that, please select CC in the Zoom menu across the screen and you can use it. And finally, if you're on Twitter, please publicize or comment as we go through, tweet about the event, and the hashtag is #IDS Annual Lecture. So without further ado, over to Samson. Looking forward to hearing your lecture. Thank you.
Okay. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine, some of you might know him, Joseph Marcel, is popularly known as Joffrey in Will Smith's series, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, invited me to see a play he's taking part in at the Young Vic in London. And I went, but mainly to catch up with him. I met him on a film set about 3 years ago when we were filming The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. It's on Netflix now, but Chiweto Ejiofor, about 3 years ago in Malawi. And we've become friends ever since. So he invited me, and I thought this would be a time to catch up with him. But I settled for the play, actually. I was taken in by the play. I think it's a brilliant rendition by Greg Hezoff. Joseph Marcel was compelling as Borneas. I also enjoyed to see the role of Hamlet played by a woman. I think Kush Jumbled short circuits the role of Hamlet to review some new insights into Shakespeare's genius in the play, you know. I studied Hamlet for my A-levels in Malawi at Comes Academy a long time ago now. Not quite so long time ago, but quite some time has passed. And I didn't know why I was moved by this play. I was at the time busy trying to paint and play guitar. One time I'm introduced to this very poetic playwright, and I'm moved. Perhaps now, I haven't been to the Young Vic. I realized, we were sitting there watching this play, I realized that actually Shakespeare was closer to my own experiences in Malawi than I imagined, you know. So I'll use the play to throw some light on some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, centered around this notion of the gift. And the gift and how it relates to my work as a contemporary artist, but also to its aspects, my work, which then touch on issues such as development, the third world, the so-called third world, the post-colonial experience, etc. For Hamlet, to get what he wants, play is a thing. It's a methodology he adopts for political reasons as a as a means of self-preservation. He's in danger at court, and he for me, picks up play as a means of self-preservation. He's in danger basically, and he doesn't want Claudius to know what he's up to, and he resorts to play. But there's a lot more things that he's doing there, by adopting play as a methodology of surviving at court. So we were pull up this quotation where he plots to catch the conscience of the king using play, you know. But this is not the only thing that he plans to do with play. He also, for me, assets himself using play, as I've explained, that he's marginalized, but through play, he managed to rearrange the court. And then in that rearrangements of elements of the courts, he is able to make himself anew. Even if it's just for a short time, things end up tragically for him, but in my opinion, very meaningfully. For me, this idea of the play is not only confined to this play Hamlet, but I think it's also Shakespeare's message to generations to come. Play is a thing. You know, it's a message that can speak to marginalized and dispossessed peoples. For instance, starting from his time, Shakespeare's time in Calvinist England, which he describes as mad. At that time, England saw the rise of capitalism and individualism, disguising as theologies of, let's say, predestination. Shakespeare himself was a grain merchant, a hoarder of goods, a money lender. Some even say tax dodger. So he wasn't exempt from what was going on, from the madness that was brewing then. England itself was busy wallowing in the trade, in other words, slave trade. And it's how it's building its empire. And it's on its way to turning herself into a country of satanic meals, as described by William Blake. Well, by the time we reach the 20th century, the T.S. Eliot describes his experiences around here as something resembling a wasteland. We have the 2 world wars. For me, this wasteland then extended across the world. We had it in Southern Africa in the form of British colonialism, which led to all kinds of things, such as the destruction of nature and human relationships, climate chaos that we see now, and the disposition of multitudes. So this madness that Shakespeare identifies during his time really extends right up to us. So what would have been Shakespeare's antidote to all this? I think he would have said, play is a thing. Play is a thing. As a Malawian, this is also the message I would like to say to the wretched of the earth, if you like to call them, those suffering from the demeaning effects of globalization and post-colonialism. The play is a thing. For me, Shakespeare's insight is also a Malawian insight, a Chewa insight, which is a Chewa, which is my father's tribe. Among the Chewa, play is a thing. The Chewa are known for a masking tradition known as Nyao, and this tradition is now a UNESCO World Heritage. Basically, the Chewa everyday life is set around these masks, which are called the Great Play. And it is these masks that are at the heart of the Chewa conception of radical democracy, culture, economics, and political resistance were called for. Okay. Now, you might ask, why play of all things? Why play to build a society for the Chewa? And why play for Shakespeare? And why play for me? Why play for you and me, if you like? Basically, the Nyao philosophy is what can be described as not animism. It's not animism, quite, people are confused, but it's more animatic. The Nyao philosophy for me is closer to science, because it's developed from the observation of nature. It's not a metaphysics. In Malawi, we have a lot of metaphysical religions, that was developed by priests and witch doctors thereafter. But what's interesting about the Nyao tradition is that it's prehistoric. This is a philosophy that were developed simply by living in nature and observing the work of nature. So this is what interests me. Now, the observation of the Chewa peoples would have been that work reduces us, necessity reduces us, right? We are born sovereign beings, but out of necessity, we are reduced to the world of things, which includes also a world of exchange, economics, such as capitalism. We are reduced to a deadening repetition and then deprived of a meaningful resistance. So play is a way humans might claim their sovereignty, claim back their sovereignty, their humanity, if you like. And this is how gift giving comes in. You know, because gift giving is just a time of play in disguise, if you like. When you give a gift, what you're doing actually, we normally think of objects, but actually, if let's say I give you a necklace, what I'm giving you is really the time I made to make that necklace. And also there's such a thing as a gift well chosen. So another way of doing time through gift giving is to think carefully of what you're gonna give. But why this excessive time? Why times? Because it's this very time that connects us to the largest scheme of things, the great play. Yeah? The time of work limits us. The 9 to 5 work, if you like, limits us. And it's the work beyond that then liberates us again, that connects us to the larger scheme of things. So this is what is happening in play. This is different from the way societies here are constructed. In the West society, we are brought up or educated to believe that we're objects of work. You work 9 to 5, 7 days a week, and then, you wake up to 6 to 7, you retire, and that's it. It's very structured. Well, I think among the Chewa, time is considered like that's not how you're thinking yourself when you wake up. You're not thinking you're subject to work, but rather you're thinking you have time on your hands. Those people who conceive time as a luxury, their life as beyond the uses of work and necessity, they will automatically practice this so-called gift economy. Because the gift economy is this very time that is excessive, that's meaningful, that is sought after, as opposed to the time that reduces us to the world of things, if you like. And I think that so to live a meaningful life is to stay close to this excessive time, if you like. It's necessary to be to live a life of prodigious generosity, Okay, it will become more. I think I'm not going to dwell too much on these things. I think I would rather let the lecture unfold. So don't get into a quagmire. So in my opinion, by avoiding mere revenge, which would have reduced him to the world of necessity, Hamlet, when he resorts to play, he sort of, for me, he points out to something beyond. Because if Hamlet, or I don't know, I'm assuming that you know this play, but basically Hamlet sees the ghost of his father who asks him to take a revenge, but there's a delay. And the question is, why does Hamlet delay even when he's been taught by the ghost of his father that he was killed by his uncle, who now married his mother? But one of the explanation for that is that Hamlet refuses to enter this mere world of necessity and exchange, to take immediate revenge for his father's death would have just simply made him one of the corrupt people at the court, who was at Claudius's court, which is obvious has been corrupted by these new systems. And Hamlet instead chooses play and chooses to conceive his plight as part of a larger scheme of things. play is a thing. So for me, it is through play that Hamlet chooses to use his plight in service of something bigger than the mere uses of necessity within the court of cloudiness. Okay. Now, so, but by the end of the day, you know, they say that there's a special providence in the pharaoh of the spell, although Hamlet is killed together with his mother and stuff. But for me, by delaying, by playing out his plight as part of a larger scheme of things, in the way, for me, puts an end to this so-called something rotten in the state of Denmark, and he gives the chance for the state to recreate itself anew, if you like. Hamlet turns himself into an object of the gift, a prodigious gift giver. In his death, Denmark is able to rearrange itself, start anew, if you like. Now, if you would like to consider play, it's easy for children to play, but for adults, that's much more difficult. Okay, so I will show you, before I proceed, what the chair used to get back to play, if you like. It's natural enough for a child to push themselves into a place of generosity. For adults, there are all kinds of things that you need, and then this is where art comes in. This is an example for a masking tradition in Malawi. The train. I'm wondering, what do you think this is here, moving here? What is this structure, you think? What is this? You think, anybody? Rib cage, something close. Maybe, you know, what looks like a. Can you guess? Cow. Looks like a cow, but well, I'll tell you why. What is? It is pretty secretive, right? But actually, it's a train, you know. Oh wow! I've revealed what it is now, so you can see. See? There's a smoke, the windows. There. Okay, now you may ask yourself, but why play? I think this is, if you want to do this so-called sovereign time, right? Time beyond the world of necessity as a form of gift giving, what you want to do is some form of secrecy, because somehow a gift always has to have to be a secret, right? The thing that I noticed a lot in Malawi is the lack of gift exchange. Like me as a Chewa, we didn't, a lot of people, like here you have a gift exchange, a lot of tribes have gift exchange. In Malawi, like for me coming from Doha, Chewa, what you don't is a lot of gift exchange. What you have instead is these raves, constant raves that frustrated the British when they colonized Malawi. They believed that if they put an end to this, they would convince Malawians to the world of necessity of that was taking court in Denmark, capital, if you like, of progress and development, if you like, if you want to put it that way. But basically, it's this, is that if you exchange usually leads to pettiness, right? If I give you a gift in play, you notice that I'm giving you the gift. I think that's quickly reduced the world of necessity. Because then you give me back the gift, which is a form of counter gifting, which is to say you cancel my gift. So it's say that whenever you see a gift coming to you, that's no good, because you can easily cancel it. So the best person who knows how to give a gift is always in secret. And this is why the society, like the Nyao society, is called. This is why a train is disguised as a cow or as a zebra or whatever. But it alludes to that, to secrecy. So the Nyao is called a secret society, not necessarily because there's anything to hide, but it's usually because that's the very nature of the gift. That's the very nature of this sovereign time that connects us to the larger scheme of things, away from the uses of work and necessity, capital, profit. And this is what happens. So when the masks come out, basically people are excited and they are able to give and take without thinking, right? I can give you an example. There's a mysterious thing that we'll do tonight. It's called giving a reception. So after my talk, we will share drinks, but we will not feel we owe anybody anything. Not even ideas, I want. And yet, if we go to a pub, and this is a giving a reception, which is a form of nyao, if you like, a mysterious way of giving a reception. And yet, if we go to a pub, if we start buying drinks, we'll start counting. We are back in the world of necessity. Bought around. Who is next? So this is why the Chewa are not gonna involve themselves in the world exchange, which quickly leads to pettiness, cynicism, obligation, all kinds of enmities, systems. You know what I mean? So the Chewa are trying to have an economy, but it's always in the form of secrecy. If you have these ongoing raves in a Chewa village, there's exchange of goods, but it's always as a secret. It's unlike, so it's either you have this, or what you have when these things are not a have is sober exchange, which is always a problem. I'll give an example. If I spend time liking people's things on Facebook, they will like my stuff back. If I don't, I could go to the moon or Mars, get one like, I do. I know that. I use social media mainly for my for as an archive. I hardly interact. I do get often 1 likes, 2 likes, no matter what I do. So gift exchange basically, without some form of secrecy, leads to this kind of tit for tat pettiness. It can start as a kind of great, but eventually it's like, Christmas, right? You start well-meaning, you have to buy your sister a present, but eventually it just becomes a habit. Oh God, I'm going home. My brother will be there. And you have a present for me from W.H. Smith. I better get one too. So you go Christmas holiday, you end up with all these tacker presents. Society can't be built on like that, on these tacker things, this kind of. But that's what capitalism has done, right? A kind of, we have lots, but how meaningful is stuff that we have within capital? How meaningful are all these goods that we're drowning ourselves in? So what do you really want to really give? To really give, it has to remain a secret. And that's why perhaps we're wondering, what's up with Hamlet? What's wrong with it? What's happened? What is it that is really communicating to us? It's always said that if let's say your parents say, you're a good mother, you're probably a bad one. If you say a good father, a good mother you almost take for granted, For me, when I'm watching Hamlet, I always think that he's entered a competition with his mother. He cannot understand the mystery, what is it? I thought this woman loved me Now he's in love with another man. Why did she care about me? And in a way, Hamlet, for me, when he moves himself into this state of play, he becomes self-sacrificing like his mother. You know, a mother is a good example of a real generosity, in that usually mothers are not bringing up their children to be so that they can pay them back. Usually, most mothers are just, it's a mysterious thing. It's almost a violent thing to watch a mother bring up a child. Why is she doing it? So, you know, that can be a form of play. So let's see if I can, so this is what's happening. It's a form of economy. It's not just some primitive esoteric things happening there. There's a logic to it. And it's a very compelling logic. These masks are historic. They predate pyramids of Egypt, and they have been tried and tested over ages. They have seen Arabs, Chinese, British, and they're still in Malawi. I was there 2 years ago. There's virulent disease, and I'm even convinced that actually the last man, the person on earth who wear a mask, I'm sure. I'm sure that the gift will have the last word. Anyway, so I think I spoke about Hamlet here. There. This the principal mask of the Chewa, which is a womb disguised as an antelope. Okay? So some Chewa people don't think I should be saying these things, but for the sake of I have to share some of this stuff, right? This is an institution. But you can see here, it looks, it's a womb basically disguised as an antelope. And you may think, what are the children there do? But I've said that it's easy for children to play. Children are already in a state of generosity. For the adults, perhaps you have to enter the mask to reach the same zone of true giving. Because really, often we people are engaged in mere exchange. We rarely give. You know, we rarely give. When we give, that's when we create real friendship. You know, it's like when you are, let's say, a penniless student, you have loads of time with your friends. This is when you make real connection. When you start working, it's all about transaction. Let's meet on the Thursday, let's meet on the Saturday. You hardly. I think in my case, the real friends I've made are still from primary school and from secondary school and from, I have loads of colleagues, but very friends, but it's partly because those friends I really had a time of, a truly generous time. We really, you know, okay. Also, the other thing I want to talk about when you're looking at these slides is the so-called interpassivity. You know, you'll be shocked at how kids can help you believe. You know, so usually these religions or play, they're always accompanied by kids. If Chewa masking, there will be a lot of children around. It's a children's faith that a child, adults adopt, and it works the same magic. If you believe that the child believes this is a monster, you might as well believe in that. It's like, you know, taking your child to see Father Christmas. You say, I don't believe in Father Christmas, but your child does, but actually you do too. You're doing it interpassively with the child. So, okay, this is, you can see Elvis. I just wanted to see samples of that, even Malawian modernity, modernism, if you like, has manifested through masking. So not only we've seen the trend here, but also this is the presence of Elvis. So what I'm trying to say, that what's happening here, Malawi is not just there, or the chair are not there standing there taking modernity passively, but rather they are reacting to it and bringing in their own interpretation or criticism, if you like. Okay. Well, lately, I've been trying to make some of these masks. This is an elephant mask that I made for Modern Art Oxford, and it's It's made out of fellows' gowns, MA gowns that we wear for dinner. And I took lots of them and made this elephant. And it represents a chief. It's from an original mask from 1960, which is this. Again, there's a lot of record of history in there. I'm sure this is the presence of the British already. I don't know whether it's really an elephant. I don't think it's an elephant. Again, there's a secrecy, but we're not going to go into detail on what this mask really is. Why have I done that? Because I really think that in modern times, in traditional societies, maybe it's the masks that come out and push people into this zone of generosity that rescues people from this world of necessity into something more meaningful, traditionally, into forms of gift giving. For me now, I think that I believe that the contemporary artists can play the same role, bringing people together into what could be described as forms of gift giving, if you like. I have made a lot of connections through work, connections which I wouldn't have made, I'm sure, if I had just come to Britain through work. As an artist, I've been able to make connection with so many people. And for me, then I also begin to make to talk about a gift, an economy of the gift, also to make a case for art. That art can play a role in adding meaning to our life and in connecting us as humans, if you like. Let's see another train, right? To get into the other work I've done, the more contemporary, I will show you another train. This is by the Lumiere brothers. I think it's a scene equally as mysterious as the one we've seen from Uchewa village in Malawi, right? The music here is equally mysterious, it's enchanting. The scene is equally mysterious. What's the scene of a train approaching of a train coming into a train station? What is the use of this scene? This is one of the first films ever made by the Lumiere brothers, French, part of French modernism, if you like. And it's simply a train arriving at a station. What's happening? When these early films were shown, they were usually to be shown in taverns, in fairgrounds and stuff, and they generated the same excitement as the one you can see in Malawi here. As this the same. And I grew up with these two aspects. As a child in Malawi, we grew up with both maskings. We would go to the home village and experience these masks. But when Africans were moved into town, and usually by trains, a lot of trains commemorate when men were taken out from their village to go to work in South Africa or Zimbabwe, But when these trains took these men from the African villages to serve the new economy of capital in South Africa and Zimbabwe, they took with them the masks. But they didn't necessarily manifest, in my opinion, in a traditional way as you saw them in the village. And for me, this is where cinema comes in in African modernity, in Malawian modernity, you know, because the Africans took this into the cities. And when I was growing up, we had, let's say in Blantyre, a place called St. Pius. It was a church hall. The Catholics were good at this. They would have the mass in one church, the other building would be a church hall, and there were all these traveling projectionists who would come. And there was lots of film that we saw. But the kind of film that we saw was kind of very specific. There were reels from Hollywood, but the projectionist would edit them. So you would have one reel of James Bond, maybe switching to Bruce Lee and stuff like that. It was a very lively affair. African audiences are always active. They make comments, they walk in and out. So the editing of the films was to reintroduce time of the gift, which is usually non-linear, right? Usually what we have now is the time of work in theater. What we have now is film as theater. Is the one we sit there passively for 2 hours, we watch a film and we go home. Pretty much like we do going to work, clocking in and out. It's hardly kind of film for gift givers, for sovereigns, if you like. If you really wanted the more exalted forms of film, then you have to go to these markets, church halls in Malawi, where the projectionists will remix the reels, make it more non-linear, so you could walk in and out the way you want, sit there, smoke a cigarette, speak to your friends and stuff. And of course, I grew up with all this stuff, and then that was in the city. And for me, the kind of excitement created in these cinema houses in the city was sometimes resembled aspects of what we saw in the villages, generated the same generosity, brought people together. Okay. So I'll give you an example that's been inspired by the two worlds of masking and film. And this is one of my films. This is 1,000 Years. I made this one in London. My films are psychogeographical. They're inspired by specific places. I never prepare them. I just walk around with a hat on my head, a camera in my pocket. And when I see these ghosts, when I'm walking, I embody them. Like I saw this man dusting his heart forever. Like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, who was also popular when I was growing up, watching film. And I made it on a building site. It's called 1,000 Years. And this one is, I made this one in America. My films are filmed by strangers, basically. When I see this event or an idea, I use a film to stop people to film me. And because they find what I'm doing mysterious, forever mysterious, they want to connect with me, really. After, when people film me like this, they say, where are you going to show this? Where I want to see. And they follow me on YouTube or Facebook, and I've made loads of friends just like that. You see, without creativity, and if I was just like hanging out in London without art, hardly. Can you imagine me just approaching somebody in London and say, hello, I want to be friends with you or connect with you? That wouldn't work. But somehow, when people meet me through art, it's as if they've known me before. They don't even see how strange that is. That it's the first time they want to. So this is the magic of art, the same way that masks, there's an effect that masks have in connecting villagers together in Africa. So it does that for me here. And that's why I'm here giving this lecture actually through these little films. This is Lizard. I made this one in Arizona desert in America. I had to wait a long time for a hiker to film me. This is Lizard. And these films are you can see them online, on YouTube. This is in America, Amistad. We've filmed this in Mystic, where You know, the famous slave ship, Amistad, docked in America. In America, I had they saw nature there, everything is Hollywood. And I saw these chains appear to be pulling me back. So as I walk around, I travel around the world, I bring my Malawi with me. And for me, there's plenty of time to practice gift giving, if you like, because this sense of time that you see in my picture is far removed from that world of work of consumerism or something. This is how I find, for me, Africa again. If I'm walking around London, this sense of time ejects me from the uses of from the everyday flows into and connects me, I should like to believe, to the larger scheme of things. Okay. The cathedral, last one. I filmed this one in London. These films, when I started making them, it was at once, and I put them online. Mainly, first they started as a way of saying hello to my sisters or updating them, but they've gone on to be shown in museums now, in galleries. I'll show you later. But how I ended up with these films. Maybe let me go to America, where you know, the films reels that we were watching, the film reels that we were watching, Malawi came from. And we can start with the ghost dance. Basically, it's a movement that started in 1889 by this guy called Jack Wilson. It is a movement. This is where the Native Americans, you know, they were basically dancing as a form of resistance to subjugation in the reservations. They believed by performing this dance, they would return to idyllic time, pre-colonial time, pre-capital time, you know, which for me was the time of the economy of the gift, if you like. Well, the ghost dance was suppressed, but somehow, according to Rebecca Sonic, she identifies it returning through film, and it came through of the train again going west, the expansion, and film introduced eventually film to the west. You know, and I hope I've already demonstrated how that is, how old traditions like Chewa masking can eventually come back in forms of film. It's the same is happening in America and in the West. We know the air film was very popular among, let's say, the working classes here in Britain, where my bridge came from. And it was part of it had to be phased out because it kept people away from work. Film was like that, a form of kind of subversion until 29, when it becomes theater, and then it's adopted more for structuring society. Charlie Chaplin, we know how subversive he was, and so forth. And the same happens in Africa. Film is introduced to Africa, and Africans made it their own, as I've described. Finding in film new forms of blossoming, if you like, or if you like, masking. The film star becomes a new mask, if you like. This is happening in African urban areas, and it leads to new developments, like new forms of African modernity. You know, African photography and dandyism is well known. I knew so many dandies when I was growing up, and partly because dandyism is part of a resistance against kind of linear time, if you like. Dandyism is perhaps the one way an African can get back to his roots, if you like, to the non-linear forms of time practiced in the villages, to the economy of a gift practiced in the villages. I'm taking strides here, but of course, eventually film gets phased, but for me, I believe that internet brought back that sense of magic that I witnessed as a child, you know, that for a time went away with the introduction of videos, but I think that the internet, with this fragmentation, can have the same subversive effects. I've made my career through the internet. I'm sure that without the internet, for me, I would have queued a long time as an artist coming in from Africa. Basically, I was discovered on Facebook. And imagine if I was trying to make my name here in thing, you know, the art world and its hierarchies, I would have queued a long time. But using the internet, time was rearranged. I was able to create myself anew here. So this is what I used to do. When I came in from Malawi, I used to spend a lot of time unemployed. I was in London, Nottingham. I used to spend a lot of time in internet cafes. I don't know whether they're still around, but when I was coming in, that was a place we Africans, dispossessed Africans, immigrants, we used to hang out. And I wrote my PhD in a internet cafe. It was warmer. There's company there. And this is how I became to make my films. I started making my films during that time of aimlessness, of unemployment, and the films started coming to me because of the kind of practicing the kind of time I was practicing, which was not very dissimilar. Yeah, I short my films there. Okay, so I will show you one more film. This is called Pickpocket. I made this in London. Basically, I just saw this man wearing a coat that looks like from the 19th century, and I asked the stranger to follow us. And this is what happened. It's what Pickpocket looked like. You can say I had loads of time in London. I miss those days. Not too sure that's a good idea teaching at Oxford or whatever. Loads of time. Easy to practice gift giving in London. Pickpocket. Okay, and this is how my films are shown in the gallery. Very interactive, immersive, like that. With text. This is shown this week at Whitechapel, and the text is about me watching film as a child in Africa and how that has inspired my practice now. Some of the things I've spoken to you about. So for me, this is the kind of film I'm looking that you can enter at any point. You can interact with, you can talk even while watching my films. You don't have to stop and be passive for 2 hours. You can. There you go. And then somebody invited me to propose for the fourth Plinth. You know, they were aware of my films, the logic of my films, and invited me, and I proposed this Antelope. And it follows the logic of film. Chilembo is big, Pan-Africanist who died fighting colonial rule in 1915 because he's a star. He becomes bigger, and his friend, a British missionary, John Chorley, is smaller. But another way of looking at it is this. It's like a film poster, right? The star, like if you see a poster of Clint Eastwood, the star is always bigger, the support is small. But another way of looking at this is that it's an equestrian plinth. And Chilembo is almost like the size of a horse, you know? So this complicates another story. And John Chorley is the size of other sculptures on Trafalgar Square, you know? So it looks small, but when we realize the sculpture and we are making it now, you see that Chorley will be at home on Trafalgar Square while the other guy rooms like a ghost. It's more complicated meanings there. Again, you cannot appreciate this sculpture by one angle. You have to go around and interact with it. And Chilembo means that, you see, this is almost scary. A human being will be as small as this. Maybe it's a huge, you know, it's a huge, usually huge on Trafalgar Square. He's going to tower. there. And it was based on this. When the mayor's office approached me, I was looking at photographs a lot, looking for aspects of, signs of Malawian modernity, if you like, modernism. And Chilembe fascinated me with his heart. I was attracted to it, but I don't know what was happening there. I looked for a hat like this all over London. I couldn't find it until I realized that he's wearing a hat like this, for effect, to bring attention to his cause, which was that you're not allowed to wear a hat in front of a white person. Months later, he was killed for this. He distributed this photograph among his followers as defiance, but he got killed for it. But for me, it takes a position of Hamlet, right? Before he was killed, they were going to deport him anyway for doing this. They were going to deport him to Seychelles or something. So instead of just entering this world of exchange with the colonials, he turns his plight into a form of gift giving. He leads an uprising. He was on his way out anyway. So he turns an otherwise desperate plight into something meaningful. For me, he takes action, he leads an uprising. Well, he's being recognized now, which is no mean feat. I think it's a miracle that he's worked. It shows himself. When the mayor's office got in touch with me, it was immediate. He was on my phone, and I said, he's just go there. A man in the heart goes up in London. So, and that's what happened. John Chilembe, by the way, means is a name of defiance, because Chilembe is the same as the womb mask. Chilembe actually means antelope, and it can also actually means a mask in a structure. And for me, that's what he's enacting with his friend here. This is the shape of an animal, but wearing his hat like this, the hat becomes more like antler. Although he looks well westernized, but I think for me, Chilembe's photograph position is that of defiance, of sticking to his gift-giving ways as opposed to the new ways that the colonials are trying to make him adopt. It's usually called colonialism, but anyway, we'll get into it. So for me, it's a performative. This is a performance of masking. No different from what I'm doing in my own films, translating aspects of masking into new technologies, new media, stuff like that. And already this guy is doing this is 1914. All his photographs are arresting. If you look up John Chilembe, all his photographs are meditated. It's like a prototype performance artist, prototype contemporary artist for me. This is why I had his photograph on my phone. And but for him to be able to have a lot to learn from him, especially from his tendency to translate very traditional esoteric traditions into modern forms. Anyway, okay, so if you want to follow, I've just a thing I think I'm going to take forever. We'll be drawing to a close soon. But if you want a bibliography, I left it. I wasn't too sure actually how I should do this, whether it should be a boring academic or maybe I should just throw bits. I hope I've thrown enough bits to you that you can follow up if you want. Like if you want, the most important thing is to paint a picture, right? But this is a good book on the problem of giving that even it can be in teaching. You don't want your student to remain your student forever. You want your student almost like to overcome you, right? You don't want to enter into a tit for tat with your student, a petty. You want your student. This is what Nietzsche's problem is. How do I teach? So that the teaching is a form of kind of prodigious giving rather than that of tit for tat, So it's a good book. This is debate. And people wonder why Nietzsche is often rude, playful. What is he doing? For me, I think he's trying to give a gift in secret, because he's aware that if you don't disguise your gift, it will be cancelled, it will be returned to you. We artists know that, right? We want the audience to like our song, but we don't want them to know exactly why. You want to be in love, but you don't know why. You don't want to know why you're in love with somebody. Because as soon as you know why you love them, you stop loving them. Because you've seen the gift, you've considered, right? So if you want to remain in love, remain mysterious, right? Like, it's everywhere. It's everywhere because the gift is almost like, it's what escapes our plans and systems and designs. The gift is a more meaningful part. Anyway, I'm not gonna go in detail. It's the logic of the gift is a good introduction to literature of the gift, if you like. It starts with mouse, thinking that a gift is an object, to complexest forms of interpretation. It's a Derrida, or Heidegger said, gift is nothing but time. This is where, you understand. Because people ask me, well, you're going to talk about a gift. Are we going to give gifts? And I'm talking about film. But film is about time. So gift is not necessarily, so to talk about a gift shouldn't be promising lots of objects. It's actually, gift giving is a means of doing time together. Let's spend time together. Simply that. It can be, okay, so I always say, why does Hamlet delay? I'm not saying that in exchange a gift can't be hidden. Okay, so let's say in some societies, like I was in Turkey, the neighbors like to bring you some food, but then you have to take the food back to the neighbor, right? But if you do it quickly, it's seen as rude, right? I give you food and you're right away. It's like, you have to, a delay is always good when you get a gift. So if a gift is about doing time, the time lag is the gift rather than the objects exchanged, right? So I'm not saying that in exchange, it can be forms of disguising the gift. You can, but some societies do that. But in Malawi, we prefer the raves, This is, so why does Hamlet delay? I think he's doing time with us. He's spending time with us. It is through his very delay that we have Hamlet. If he was quick to revenge, we have no Hamlet. So you can see what Shakespeare is doing there. You realize it, A terrific book on the importance of prodigious generosity, even in economics. The only time America was able to do anything for Europe was when Marshall Plan, when it gave without a return, right? Gives money to Europe after the wars without, it's not like aid or anything, but this is like a pure generosity. We still have to see that in Africa. I don't know whether Africa has been given a Marshall Plan yet, where, because that's when true generosity comes. And we're not, gift giving is not the same as charity, because charity is directed. Real gift giving is prodigious, meaning that the reward is in its very giving, not in the return. And every artist will tell you that actually satisfaction is when an artist has found an area of true giving, an area of true generosity, they will give out for free. If you're still wanting to be paid, usually, I don't know, but I would rather be paid though. You know what I mean? So, but usually it's that. If you found true giving, it's its own reward. And so if you're still thinking, if you're always looking for a counter gift, maybe you should keep looking until you found something you're prepared to let go without a counter gift, if you like, obligation. Anyway, you can also read here. I've just lately understood the eccentricities of my father. This is the book I wrote when I was loitering around unemployed in the country, loads of time. Another form of gift giving, writing. And I think, now that I've studied aspects of the gift, I could understand some of the eccentricities that my father was involved in. My father, for instance, if you asked him for anything, you say, "Oh, I want to buy sweets." There was never sweets for you. He always had no money, right? But if you went into the wardrobe and check his pockets, there was always money somehow. So if you're looking for, if you could dare and check his pockets, or yeah, somehow I didn't feel like my father avoided this kind of forms direct. He always gave in an indifferent way, and it's fascinating. I think this book is full of fascinating ways in which he's trying to give a gift in secret. It's only now that I understand. You won't get that when you read the book. When I was growing up, it was just all bewildering for me. Why is he doing that for? Why can't he just be straightforward? Why is he? But he came from the village where masters the art of giving. So I was wondering whether he took that with him and devised all forms of gift giving. For instance, he never used to keep children's books in his house. So I read lots of his books, Freud, Nietzsche, and stuff, and I was ahead at school. You know, because kids can read and pick things up, and we were ahead because I read his books when I was. So it's eccentric things like that. Okay, Malawi. There, we know where it is now. This is a school. Comes Academy where I went. I had an extreme Western education here. I spent 6 years of Latin and Greek with the sciences and etc. Right? But I didn't leave this school spiting Africa, which I thought maybe was the intention, because this was all my teachers here were Western. But actually, I left this school with high regard for Africa, because a lot of things that were teased at this school, I think you could say that in the villages, they're really mastered, in my opinion. Anyway, I was taught in very traditional ways of painting, music, but when I went to university, I embraced modern art, Picasso's, and I painted for some time. I was a painter. This is just some artists who've been inspired by film. We don't have time to go in detail, but I painted, and these were my inspiration, especially Dada, surrealism, and then situationism. Until one day I made this one. This was my first, this was Paul on the road to Damascus for me. My sister was visiting me in the studio, and we were talking religion, and I made this work called A Football Plastered in Passages of the Bible, and the ball gleamed, and I stopped painting at once, which I was doing, mainly for expatriates, hotels, and stuff. A medium which really didn't speak to my African friends, if you like. But when I made this ball, these guys were not aware of contemporary art. I went into the market and I connected right away. So from this moment, I became what I am now, which is more a multimedia contemporary artist. And from this, I moved to writing and eventually to the films that we've seen today, which took me all the way to the fourth Plinth. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Samson, thank you so much. That was just fascinating. Come and join me here and we'll explore a little further some of these intriguing and fascinating. It's really a journey I think you've taken us on, and it's one that strikes me as sort of cross-cutting where we are in thinking about Malawi and African cultures, notions of the gift, and then how those can be represented in a diversity of forms. And I'm particularly struck by that notion of prodigious generosity, that notion of that being something that involves time, actually generosity of time, and giving of that kind being in secrecy. And I think those are actually all notions of the gift that slightly challenge the way some Western disciplines have thought about the gift, which is much more in terms of gift and counter gift. I'm thinking of Marcel Mauss and those notions in anthropology about a gift creating a relationship of reciprocity, which is much more immediate in a way. And I think you've shown us a rather different world and way of thinking about these things. But I'm sure there will also be questions and comments people would like to make about the aspects of your own personal journey and the artistic practice. as well as about the colonial and post-colonial representations you're dealing with. So let's now open this up for some reflections, for some comments. And we may have some that are coming through on the Q&A. Perhaps we could take a group of questions that are online, while those of you in the audience also think about anything that you'd like to say, and then I'll ask people if they'd like to come up to the microphone. So Gary, why don't we hear what people have been thinking and reflecting from our online audience?
Okay, I've got one here from Robert Gira. How has art in Malawi developed over time since it's gained its independence?
That's a really interesting one. So that's one. We've agreed we might take a few.
Yeah. This is from Sophie Robertson. Can you share a bit about becoming a university professor? Has it been a positive experience for you?
At Oxford? Oh, yeah. Okay.
And maybe one more at this point.
No, they're still coming in.
They're still coming in. So, Samson, why don't we begin with those two? So it's your journey about becoming a professor at Oxford, but also the journey of art in Malawi, actually, and maybe those have interwoven a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's not so much the journey that Malawi has taken, but the West has taken, because it's the West that has had to catch up. Contemporary art is actually what connects, is the West eventually connecting to Malawi. In the West, art for many years, it still was conceived as a mimesis, as a representation. And the West has had to go through history, the Renaissance, the Romantic period, the modern period, and the postmodern, until what we have now, what's called contemporary art, which is art as socialized praxis. This is where the West steps from the notion of art as a kind of a superstructure, something you did on a Sunday, your watercolors or like your, to art as infrastructure. Contemporary art attempts to approach art as infrastructure. Art as socialized praxis. That's Africa, That's Africa. So it's taken the West that long to finally connect with Malawi, because when they came to Malawi in the 19th century, they were imposing the mimetic paradigm on Malawi. And you still see it as remnants, as in curios that you see in Malawi, the awful paintings that you see that the Africans are trying to sell to experts and stuff. But the whole time the Africans were doing this, they continued their art. The traditions that I've showed you, the Nyao masking tradition. Art in Malawi is infrastructure. It's not something you do on a Sunday. We actually don't even need a museum for that reason. We have barrows in the villages, they're called barrows, they're in the open, and they're part of the social. And this is what contemporary art is trying to do here, become a social thing. So yeah, it's more the journey that the UK perhaps has taken to connect with Malawian traditions. Yeah.
It's a very, very good reversal. So in a way, you're saying art is lived in Malawi.
Yeah, it's a social living thing. It's social praxis, as opposed to something you just hang on your wall, or as a way of representing things. It is at the very heart of, for instance, I've demonstrated now how art can take part in the economy of the gift, how it can help us push into a zone of prodigious generosity. So away from this kind of the pettiness of exchange, if you like, into something much more, meaningful. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so your own journey to becoming a professor at Oxford of Fine Art, how does that? Tell us a little bit about that, and perhaps how it fits with this, or doesn't fit with that sense of art as something that's lived, that everybody is doing as social practice.
Yeah, I think that eventually Oxford came to me. It was eventually Oxford got mature enough to employ somebody like me. When it was still steeped in mimetic tradition, it was calling Africa primitive. Wouldn't have given my job to something like my father, for instance. But now, since Oxford got matured, understands better, about art beyond something just you did in your gallery or whatever. They are ready for an African professor. So they gave me this position.
Fantastic. And is are you feeling in Oxford that the rest of Oxford is ready?
I think they're getting there. It's
Yeah.
unlike, I must say that Oxford has an appetite for change. You know, it's unlike my father's time. My father spoke like an Englishman. He had to come to Oxford. I think things are changing slightly. I think that there's a meeting point now, a point of real exchange, if you like. It's no longer kind of a patronized relationship with it. Now it's I feel like I'm bringing something to Oxford. I also have plenty of learn from Oxford, but it's not just a one-way thing. It's a real. I think Oxford still has. It's a bit of a time warp. There's a lot of work to be done, but the good news is that I think the place is open to change. Really, unlike before, I feel that it's humble now. It's a bit. It's been humbled in time. I think so. I think it's fair, and like I've lived in. I've seen the trajectories, the attitudes, the challenges that my professors met, my parents met, is unlike the ones that I would have faced. I think the world has, technology has made the world smaller. We are more connected now, and we have different challenges. And I'm optimistic, really. Yeah, I should like to the
That's great. So, is there anybody in the room who'd like to offer a comment or ask a question? Peter, wonderful. So, if you come up to our microphone.
Samson, thank you so much and welcome. One of the things we think a lot about with IDS in terms of one of the big global challenges is indebtedness. So many countries in Africa or elsewhere in the world are struggling to escape a debt trap which has been created by financial systems. Which are very reluctant to change. You've talked about the gift, generosity, you referred to the Marshall Plan. You said you haven't yet seen that for Africa. I don't think we're likely to see something in the near future. What can we take from your ideas of the gift and your experience of what you see as prodigious generosity into the realms where financial systems seem completely intractable? What can we learn from your approach to take into those spaces, perhaps to make some kind of difference? Thanks.
So again, I've seen this change, in my lifetime, this shift, if you like. So my students, for instance, are different from my from the generation before them. I think the students now, they are looking for alternative ways of looking at the world. They genuinely are. They don't believe that capitalism has all the answers, So I feel the time for Africa is now, actually, when it can really contribute and its ideas can be considered. By the way, many aspects of what I've talked today are already adopted in the West. Continental philosophy, aspects of continental philosophy, anthropology, are already adopted some of these ideas. It's just they haven't been adopted here mainstream. They're taking forever. But a lot of the artists that I studied, that I feel are connected within the West, let's say the Situationists, we're studying the potlatches of North America, of Africa, and developing new ways of looking at the world, And it's just that they remain peripheral, but readily, these are ideas that are spoken in the mainstream by my students. This is what they are looking for, alternatives. So Africa, a place like Africa has already been given, apart from technology. where else are the ideas that the West has coming from? I think they're coming from the New World, if you like. The New World has changed the West as much as the West has changed the New World. It's not a one-way thing. It's always easier to say Western this, Western philosophy. Western philosophy is very thin. A lot of what it knows, it learns from the colonies. And then it's shipped back to the colonies. A good example is continental philosophy, or let's say you take aspects of psychoanalysis, like Kenyan psychoanalysis. These are all ideas that were learned from shamans and witch doctors from and brought here and changed. So I think the thing is just to acknowledge the exchange and to move away from these forms of thinking that Africa is just like, it's a place like it's just an object of charity. Africa has contributed, is still contributing. And to have entered this place of real generosity with it is not necessarily to be charitable to the continent, it's simply a way of building a more meaningful relationship. And for me, as I say, a gift is its own reward. I think that a more empowered Africa, if you like, a more partnered Africa would enrich a place like this. Marshall Plan, I would say that's in order. I think that's in order, and this is what I'm saying, that you cannot. Then we cannot talk about all these things about environmental catastrophes and etc. Because the West has been there, right? You've had an industrial revolution, you moved to the city, dismantled. The question is, do you need the same to happen in Africa? Does Africa need to go through phases of industrialization, displacement that the West went through? Is that necessary? And are there enough resources on earth to do that anyway? So it seems to me, there have to be alternative ways of thinking of development for places like Africa. Surely it cannot develop the way Britain. There has to be, and for more things like a Marshall Plan for the continent is part of it. It's just a more, if people are talking about saving the planet, for me, I can think of more sensible solutions, which is to enter into forms of real exchange with the continent beyond charity. You know, everybody wins from that. If not, it's just more madness, you know? So, yeah, I'm hoping that Africa doesn't take the same trajectory. Anyway, there isn't enough resources on earth to do that. And also we have to, for me, I would like us to start thinking, which is far from what's in vogue. Usually a lot of people talk about the environment, hippies, for instance, they're hippies, or really affluent middle classes who are feeling guilty about hippies out there. Anyway, so, but this, you know, the whole Extinction Rebellion, these are the guys who are going to be the next capitalists, right? The next Steve Jobs, because hippies make great capitalists, don't they? If you really know how to deny yourself, you make money quickly. Yeah? And yet somehow here, when you're humble, when you whatever, you're not flashy, people say, oh, he's so good, he's a millionaire, but he's just wearing jeans. He's a good man. You know, this is the opposite from ways of thinking where I'm coming from. The African is thinking the problems of the earth comes from excess. There's too much on earth, you know, that's the problem. There are many problems on earth, not because there's a lack. This is Western thinking, right? There are problems on earth because we have too much. There's too much fish in the sea. That's why we've got all these problems with the markets, the French fighting the British, the millionaire fishermen, millionaire winemakers, millionaire miners. It's too much. If we didn't have too much, we have all these billionaires and millionaires. You know, how can you talk about luck when there's so many billionaires and millionaires on earth? So you realize that actually we are in problems more because there's too much. The earth is too much. The problem what we have is the prediction of the Garden of Eden. The human beings' problem is how to deal with excess. And the gift giving is one way of dealing with excess. That one way of that systems, there's a recognition that all systems, this is science, by the way, you can read it in the cassette here, all systems operate in excess. So for a system to operate, it has to give without return. That's common sense. You can teach that to a child, right? Eat enough. If you keep eating, you get the American body, right? So the African recognize this already. Like if you come to Malawi, if I give you food, if you eat everything, it's obscene, right? Yeah, am I wrong? What have I done that this person is finishing everything on the plate? Here it's the opposite. If I come to have dinner at your house, I don't finish, you say, what's the problem with you? You know, so it's a different way of thinking. But the African is very much aware of this indispensability of excess, of what's called the accursed share. So much so that you go in villages in Africa, you see cows roaming around. You say, why are you guys starving? People tell you these cows are being concentrated to ancestors. We can't eat them. They are aware of this notion that there's a need to expand without return. You know, but in societies where you believe there's a lack, everything has to be recycled. But, you know, my students are shocked when I say don't recycle. The problem with the world at the moment is too much recycling. It's precisely because we are recycling too much that we have problems. If we learned of this notion of the accursed share, of giving without return, I'm sure the earth will easily organically recover, you know? Because if you, let's say, do like they used to do in the Middle Ages, you harvest, you leave some in the field, you don't need fertilizers, right? It looks like a waste, but actually it's a logic that some things, for me, that's another thing, is to enter to rethink the way you think economics here is another, you know, to think that perhaps, for me, the key is to think that the problem is not a lack, but rather.
It's fantastic. So the reversals that come from just looking at things from a different angle, from an angle that, as you're saying, has actually been mainstream all along. It's just that those in the West don't recognize it, which is great. I think we've got time just for a couple more questions. So I'm going to see what's come through on the Q&A. Maybe we'll just take 2 or 3. Maybe we can take one more from the room as well, if someone would like to be thinking of one. So Gary, what else
this is from Kate. With regards to gift giving, do you see any gender dimensions in relation to time involved, for example, in Malawi?
That's a great question.
Oh, yeah.
Can we just see if we've got a couple of others, then you could come back on all of them.
One more. This is from Dominic Glover. If gift giving is about prodigious generosity without an expectation of
return,
giving back. Does it depend on the ability of an individual or society to generate a surplus? I wonder if you could expand on that.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. And have we got maybe one more in the room? No, not at this point. So, Samson, you could address those, and then we'll wind it up.
Yeah. So tonight, actually, it's what we call. I'm coming from a matrilineal society, so I've talked about a very feminine, if you like, economy, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's gender. You know, there's a difference between sexuality. You know, these are complex things. I've showed you that the principal mask is a womb disguised as an antelope. So to say that Chewa societies are matrilineal is more a recognition, you know, of this kind of need for generosity. My mother is a very good example of prodigious generosity, if you like, a mother and child. So, and that's what's put at the center of gift economies like Africa. And like in Malawi, if you like, and the values are different, you know. So society of the gift rewards those who lose more, you know. Here it's about who accumulates, who is a millionaire, is the one who gets the glory. But in gift societies, there's what's called competitive altruism. This flabbergasted the British when the African, but it can extend on how you approach suffering. You know, there can be such a thing as competitive suffering, competitive generosity, the so-called potlatches, you know, it's practiced by the Native Americans, where they would work for 6 months and the other 6 months they would compete in who loses the most, you know. And the same in Malawi, there is aspects of that, of competitive altruism, who lives more. But in order, then, so this takes us to the next question, which is about a return. Which, yes, so when I say gift giving, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a feeble economy. Basically, what happens in Malawi, for instance, traditional, people would work hard in the field for 6 months growing crops, and then another 6 months would spend in prodigious expenditure, would come in forms of masking, the initiation ceremonies, all kinds of traditions that the British colonists found superfluous. So, but to be a good gift giver, you have to be resourceful. So the gift economy comes with the notion of being resourceful and squander. It's not just losing. You also have to have the know-how on how to be resourceful, so you can lose something. So yeah. So it's not a feeble economy. It's a hard work is called for too. There's even, you know, as I say, in a traditional village, you be busy growing for 6 months, and if you're lazy, you don't necessarily be considered a good gift giver. You know, it's so that the villagers would work hard for 6 months, and the other 6 months would be who gives the most. Anyway. Yeah, and by the way, you shouldn't think that I'm preaching economies that have not been tried before. What's really new is capitalism. These economies were there before. As I say, these economies in Africa are prehistoric, and they were there in the Middle Ages. So if you want to know the replacement of Nyao, is the cathedral here, right? So if you were in the Middle Ages, there was usury. What's called usury was forbidden. So what you have is, if you want to give something, you didn't necessarily give it to your neighbor. That would lead to resentment right away. Have you tried giving? If you give somebody something, they don't necessarily like you. They secretly have this is a problem of aid, what you're doing to Africa, shipping lots of thinking Africans will like you. Not necessarily, you know. So the way you do it in the Middle Ages, you take your alms to the church. You know, give it to the monks and the priest will give them to your neighbor, and your neighbor will say, "Thank God," you know, and then you can live at peace with them because they don't feel you've demeaned them or anything. So there was this notion of secret giving even here in the and this the economy that we have now of eating the so-called accursed share probably came with after the Reformation, especially when Martin Luther criticizes the church, when actually the problem with the church was that it wasn't extravagant. It wasn't extravagant enough. That was the problem. Europe was becoming rich, and the church hadn't caught up with the people and caused this revolution. I'm not trying to. There are many ways for me. I'm very familiar with Europe. There are many places in Europe I can connect with, but it's more perhaps the so-called Western. That's alien. But Europe is pretty familiar to Africa. Pretty familiar to many aspects of things I've spoken about. And so there are models, there are already models that have been there before that can be readopted as alternatives to the destructive capital as we know it today. But I want to say one thing, is that for me, I really believe that the new economy is through capital, right? So I'm not a kind of, I'm not advocating this, let's give it all up. And for me, I think that we have to change society through this. We have to change this thing into something else, rather than walk away from it. This system called capital, it's more to to tally with it, to reform it into something else. Perhaps a synthesis between what I'm talking about and capital, So I'm not an anti-technology. Right. I don't believe, this is the last point I make. I don't believe we have to go back to the bush. I don't believe we can actually live even like in harmony with nature. I don't believe in that. The Chewa didn't believe that. The tribes in Africa, masking is anti-nature. The Nyao tradition, which is 100% culture, is anti-nature. Human beings are like that. One, when you're talking about economy, when you're talking about any philosophy to do with human beings, you have to acknowledge this side, the nihilist side of humans, this total radical negativity that is the human being. You have to acknowledge for it. A denial of that for me leads to stock markets. So if, for instance, you go to the stock market, are these men really doing this thing to make money, or it's just some kind of bizarre negativity that could be taken care of if they put on a mask or something? These guys typing. So you have to acknowledge that. You cannot just say, oh, let's go back to human beings are not like animals, are not happy just to live, die. Human beings want to actually disrupt this cycle of life and death. We have something going on there that has to be acknowledged. For me, this is why I bring ritual, religion, creativity. You cannot change the world without those things. This is, okay.
Fantastic. Well, Samson, I cannot thank you enough. I mean, I introduced this partly by saying there were two very live debates going on at the moment at IDS that I think I was hoping your work would enrich and enliven. I think what you've actually done is turn both of them upside down. So I started by saying we were thinking here about decolonizing development. I think what you've shown us very powerfully is that actually what we think of as development in that positive sense of progressive change for humans in interactions with nature was already going on, is powerful, is alive and well, way prior to colonialism. And that actually there are ideas there that not just could be drawn on, but are already there, are already lively and enacting. And actually they turn upside down many of the tenets that this post-war thing called development has identified, whether it's about the notions of economic exchange or scarcity, or as you've elaborated, or aid as charity, or indeed the ones we haven't really explored. I'd be fascinated to talk to you about transparency and accountability. These are mantras that go on. How does that sit with your notion that for prodigious generosity really to work, it has to be done in secrecy? So I think you've really challenged us there and shown us the power of African Nyao thinking to development. Secondly, I started by saying...
That's a good one.
Okay. Secondly, I started
so the
by
call
saying...
for corruption is generous.
We were interested in art as representation, and you've immediately turned that one upside down, because as you've shown us, art is lived, it's lived social practice. And I think by bringing your own lived social practice to us this evening, you've immensely enriched our discussions on what we will take further in these debates. Finally, I'm so excited about your sculpture, because in a way, the antelope up there is also a story in sculptural form about development. And by overturning those power relations and having your behatted performative Africans standing above that small colonial John Chorley, I think you've also shown us something about really the power relations we should be thinking about that are perhaps alive and well and need to be brought to the fore in development. So I think we haven't got time for further discussion now, but I hope this conversation can continue. We've really enjoyed what you've shared with us this evening. Please join with me in thanking Samson for a fantastic lecture.